Well, good evening, this is Hound Dog Steve coming to you on the 18th of October, which is a Thursday evening, and our first story. It's better to be born rich. Oh, what a surprise. Talent, no guarantee of success. Study. Well, that certainly must be true for Andrew Van Dam of the Washington Post for even bothering to write this story, but also for the people who actually put the thing together in the first place. Because if you can't tell at a glance that if you start a 100-meter race and some people start a foot from the finish line and everyone else has to start at the start line, guess what? Even if you have an IQ of room temperature, you are going to win that race faster than anyone else. There you go. I just did the study for you. I mean, this is so absolutely obvious that, you know, even if you are not the brightest or the sharpest knife in the drawer, you know, if your parents can pay for you to go to college, can show you where to invest in long-term returns such as dividends and so on and so forth, or advise you when to get out of a certain investment, wow, you are leagues ahead as somebody who doesn't have the financial wherewithal. And of course, this is the beauty of the internet. That's one of the things that has happened since we've had things like YouTube. People with a very small amount of money and a large amount of talent have been able to video themselves and put themselves out in the world stage for everybody to see. And there are some truly brilliant people out there. I've been actually staggered, I'm still staggered by the amount of quality material that goes up on YouTube and the amount of relatively unknowns that have risen to the surface because of social media and YouTube. It really is a great leveler in our society. We must remember that. That's why, you know, we should be very careful of these channels being taken over by the government or by a particular ideology that you know, might halt the free flow of ideas and yeah, new people up and coming, because there are always new up and comers, there are always new ideas. We're in a constant state of flux, and anybody who's trying to hold history in place, like King Canute, who tried to hold back the tide in East Anglia, was made an absolute fool of. And talk about another person being made an absolute fool of. Here is the new IPCC report. To avoid catastrophic climate change, we need carbon pricing. Here it is, and there you go. There's your classic picture of a smog, pollution-filled sky. Well, let me see, how far back do we want to go? In the 70s, they were telling us the world was coming to an end because of global cooling. We were going into another ice age. And then the 80s came along, and of course we were going to be doomed by the year 2000, and then it was 2015, and then it was 2020, and now it's 2030. And this argument is really suffering from fatigue. And it's definitely got the feel of the boy who cried wolf syndrome to it, and lots of people are tiring of it. I read this in the news the other day. People are tiring of this end of the world climate change scenario. And of course what I do with people now is I just pull out these two charts. They're absolutely wonderful. This is the last 2,000 years of weather on this planet, and you can see we are right just here. Okay, we've only just reached the average mean temperature. We were in the little ice age, we dropped about 3 degrees, we've come up about 3 degrees. But here's the medieval warm period. And what about the Minoan warm period? You know, there was no CO2 issues back then, there was no population. I think at that point in time we were probably only about 5 million people on this planet. And the other chart is a 750,000 year chart. This is from the Vostok ice core samples. Now you see the black line is the mean line. So in the last 750,000 years, look how much time, I would say about 7/8 of the time, we spent below average temperatures. Okay? And still, again, you see in the past, way in the past, 400,000 or 500,000 years ago, there were those spikes in temperature. Well, where was the CO2 then? Where was the human input then? Okay, so I'm not denying that it's climate change. As you can see, climate change happens all the time. But this nonsense about CO2 and the world is coming to an end, well, it will if we don't adapt. And that is the only question here, is that we have to adapt to these coming changes, these coming anomalies in weather. And that's what you're going to see, and that's what we are seeing, is destabilization of seasonal patterns. Atmospheric compression events are starting to happen more and more because of the increase in cosmic rays hitting the planet, and there will be an increase in volcanic activity and earthquake activity. Anyway, I'm going to let you do your own research on that one, but really, IPCC, how wrong do you have to be, and how long do you have to be wrong before even you see the pattern of flawed science going on here? Okay, next story. The evidence is clear. Canada urgently needs proportional representation. Here it is. Proportional representation. This was completely disappointing. This article is by Ed Broadbent, and he is the chair of the Broadbent Institute. And Hugh Siegel is an author, former senator, and principal of Massey College. Now, when Justin Trudeau ran in the last election, in which he was elected Prime Minister, one of his platform promises was that it was the last first-past-the-post election we were going to see, and that he was going to institute proportional representation. He has not done so. He's not even addressed this issue, except that there was a non-partisan committee was struck. They called for a referendum on the issue, and Justin Trudeau said only if we can have an option for the status quo. Well, that is not a referendum. But we do need proportional representation. We need a situation where every vote counts. Okay, right now, because of the way ridings are set out, and you can see this in Kawartha Brock area, there is a tiny amount of population compared to one of the Toronto ridings, and so you get less bang for your buck in Toronto because there are more people voting and less people in the more rural areas, and this does not reflect how every individual voted. And so we had a situation, for example, in the last election with Doug Ford getting a majority of the seats. He had a little over 2 million votes, and the Liberals had a little over 1 million votes. Now Doug Ford basically kicked the Liberals to the curb. They only got 7 seats with their little over 1 million, I think it's 1.2 million votes that they got. And Doug Ford got 2.2 million votes. He should have had, from that proportional representation, he should have had just double the seats that the Liberals have. And he doesn't. And Doug Ford and the PCs got 76 seats. So half the votes and you get 7 seats, and half the votes you get 76 seats. It just depends on where your ridings are. And so this does not truly represent what the people would like to see. Now, I know this is going to end up with a lot more minority governments, but for the people, a minority government is a better government, because those governments listen to the people. They have to, because in order to maintain their mandate to govern, they have to seek the approval of the public. And so the public is always better served. Do not listen to your politicians. When they cry about, we need a majority government, we need a mandate to govern, blah, 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 don't listen to them. They want it for their benefit and their benefit alone. With proportional representation and minority governments, the public is back in the driver's seat. So yes, we need proportional representation. When do we need it? We need it now. Justin Trudeau, and we need minority governments. They are the best kind of governments for the people of the country. Okay, next story. This is a bit distressing. Okay, this is a chap called Jordan Hunt, and I'm going to play you the video. This is like about a 30-second video or something, 35 second, and this is a guy. This was an anti-abortionist rally and a pro-life rally met, and this young man turns around and starts arguing with one of the with one of the anti-abortionist protesters, who is standing there basically doing nothing at all, just holding a sign, and he actually kicks her. You can see him winding up to kick her, and then he lamely says, "I was trying to get your phone, I was trying to get your phone." And this violence, we're starting to see this kind of violence everywhere. And here's another story. Cops probe attack. And here is a woman this time. Anti-abortion activist Lefty is comforted after allegedly being attacked by a pro-abortion activist below right outside Ryerson's University. And this feeling that you can just fly off half-cocked and start attacking people. And I've got to admit, you know, we're seeing this is really happening more and more on the left-wing side of things. The Liberals and the Democrats, we're seeing this rioting everywhere, this abandoning of the law. I mean, even Hillary Clinton said, you can't be civil with these people. Well, what do you say? You're encouraging people to not be civil? If we lose our civility, we lose everything. And anyway, take a look at this little clip and I'll come back and we'll finish up. Here we go.
Gets raped by somebody and they're like, I'm a 16-year-old and I can't have this baby. Think you should keep it?
It's a baby.
Yeah.
If someone is raped and she gave birth and she decided to kill her 3-year-old child.
So this is actually kind of scary, because what I've been noticing is that there's no way to discuss with these angry people. There is no way to have any kind of a conversation, because as soon as you stray from their narrative, all of a sudden they start screaming and shouting and yelling and calling you names and goodness knows what else, and you just can't talk under those circumstances. So I think it's going to be very, very difficult to bring out the olive branch here, when every time you bring out the olive branch there is an unrealistic expectation that you are going to drop all of your beliefs and principles and suddenly jump on board with their beliefs and principles, in the belief that their principles are any better than yours. We all have a right to opinion, we all have a right to freedom of speech, and we all have a right to express that, as long as it doesn't invoke violence. So I think we should be very concerned about this turn of events. This is not good, it doesn't bode well, and if we can bring it down to like a much smaller scale, you can imagine, you're in a relationship situation, you're with your girlfriend, wife, or what have you, and it doesn't matter who does the hitting or who starts it, but as soon as somebody gets slapped or punched, you can't take that back. You have betrayed the trust. Okay, so we have to be very careful when these things happen, because once this starts taking place, the trust is broken. And how do we come back from that? Or if you haven't been in that situation, you can imagine how difficult it would. Friendship. Your best buddy. You have an argument and it turns to a punch-up. It's not easy to come. It's going to take years to repair the damage that was done by that argument or fight. Okay? And frankly, I don't think we have years. We don't have the luxury of years. We have to be getting along with each other right now, right in the here and now, if we're going to solve some of the massive problems that are facing us on this planet. And we have to come to some kind of agreement, some kind of compromise. if we're ever going to resolve this. So I'm putting out a plea, a hope, a call for sanity, for understanding and forgiveness by all parties, because we have to move ahead, we have to come together, and we have to solve or start solving some of these bigger problems like homelessness, like food issues, people who can't keep up with the cost of living, a growing retirement group, changes in the environment. You know, I think we need to maybe stop worrying less about carbon dioxide and more about how we're going to live with a changing climate. Not that it never stops changing. I mean, you know, it goes through periods of big changes, and it goes through a period of quite a benign time. And you can see for the last 10,000 years, we have been relatively benign. And it has given us our seasons, it has given our wonderful opportunity to have agriculture and sustainable food growth. And we are seeing now this up and down in the weather, and that's the issue. It's not whether we warm, it's not whether we cool. And if we could cut carbon dioxide emissions by even 50 or 60% immediately, if I could just wave my magic wand, and we could do that immediately, our weather patterns would not change probably for 20 to 30 years. Okay, this planet is a big place, and the atmosphere and its weather patterns are huge, huge systems. You know, the ocean currents, huge systems. You know, this is like the biggest super tanker in the world. It might take miles to stop that tanker. It might take miles to turn even a little bit to the left or to the right. And that's what it's like with the environment. We need to concentrate on how we're going to cope with this changing situation as a priority, and deal with pollution is our next biggest issue, I believe. And I believe last of the three is CO2 issues. And I'm not going to get into it now, but I can prove that CO2 is a trailing indicator, not a leading indicator, so it will take care of itself down the track. But we do need to work on getting along together, working out how we're going to deal with a changing environment, and how we're going to solve some of our most pressing societal problems. Okay, so this is Hound Dog Steve signing off. I hope you enjoyed those stories. So please like and subscribe, comment, and join the conversation. And please, this is the way we resolve problems, discuss issues, and come to terms with the real world. So please, you take care. You have a great weekend coming up, and we will talk very, very soon. See you now. Bye.